Hello, I'm Scott Soshnick.
And I'm Eben Novi-Williams, and this is the live event hangover sports business podcast, the Sporticast.
I wish it was a hangover. That would mean afterward I went out. When I did go to dinner, but zero drinks. I had multiple iced teas. But, when you get in early, excuse me, do the event, go out later than you normally do for an old man like me, you get pure exhaustion on a Wednesday. That's where I stand. How about you?
Yeah, that's basically what I meant, live event or hangover-wise. I think you and I both have hoarse voices. I feel like I spoke.
I just got a little something caught.
8 straight hours yesterday, and yeah, my throat hurts after that. But a good Invest in Sports event here in New York City, Scott. So some big names speaking. I'll let you start off. You opened the day with Chris Christie. You ended the day with Melody Hobson. Give me your first blush takeaways from a jam-packed day at the NASDAQ on Tuesday.
I gotta say, the enthusiasm overall for sports as the investment. And despite everybody and anybody wanting to be involved in sport, whether it was Melody, even Chris, he understands what it's all about. He's on the board of the New York Mets. He's like, I'm here to talk to Steve Cohen about anything he needs help with. Maybe that's real estate, right? He talked about all the ancillary businesses. He talked about the stadium MetLife being done right before his administration. And he was talking about no way I let that happen with those teams crossing the river with New York names. That would have been my price for the teams crossing over. And of course, he probably would have figured something else out, but he would have extracted something on that deal. So just the level of enthusiasm that everybody was showing for the future of sports investors. That could be LP, that could be majority stakeholders, that could be, and I'll let you talk a little bit about this too, because you're younger than I am, but we had the future vision. We had the children of sports team owners there with some dad, with Shad Khan right there in the front row watching Tony discuss AEW as well as English Premier League and NFL. We had the future of golf, right? We had Scott O'Neill saying he's already touched base with Brian Rolap, the new CEO for the PGA, to see if they can bridge that divide. Bubba Watson was there. He had some really cool things to say about the business of golf in the session, but I got to tell you, some of the stories. Yeah. And the goats as well. Literal goats. I'm glad you brought that up a bunch of times.
Goats, not greatest of all time.
Well, it shouldn't be a surprise that, he owns a minor league baseball team as well.
Yeah.
So to bring a little bit of sort of that element of it and promotion to golf, that's not a surprise. But he was the storyteller at dinner. Man, he had everybody rolling with some of the things he was talking about. And I'll give one. Like, one of his dreams was to play in the NBA All-Star Celebrity Game. And I guess 1 year in LA, he got his chance to do it. They were out there playing in whatever it was. And he was somewhere high on the leaderboard. He couldn't remember whether he was leading or second place, whatever, but he was high on the leaderboard. And so he said he's going up to take a shot. And he's like, I look to my right and I know it's Tracy McGrady. And I've never played with somebody like this. And he knew, he's like, because, I thought I had all day to get the shot. He goes, and within a millisecond, McGrady blocks my shot 10 rows deep into the stands. He goes, but later on, I see a photo. Somebody gave me a photo of the shot. And he's like, I see my pinky on my left hand bent all the way back. He's like, I didn't feel it at the time. And I was fine. I was running on adrenaline. But he woke up in the middle of the night and his pinky was killing him. He calls his trainer, and there was no way. He's like, I couldn't back out of the tournament. I couldn't let everybody know I got hurt doing this. If I was ever going to back out, it's like I was going to lie and say it was food poisoning or something. But just hearing him then how he had to compete the next day, he's like, I had to prepare. I couldn't bend the finger. So I had to sort of prepare well before I ever would have. Like some guy shooting 3 minutes before I would, he's starting to grip the club so he could get the finger wrapped around the club. He was the head storyteller in chief along with Scott O'Neill. So those are my takeaways. I mean, I loved Melody Hobson. I love her enthusiasm. I love career investors. She's only had one job, that's Ariel Investments, but she's got her project level. She ain't done. She's gonna add sort of women's sports to that fund. Jason Wright is out there raising funds. She said there should be announcing the close of the fund pretty soon at a number she's happy with. As we all know, everybody and their mother is out trying to raise money in different parts of the
It's a
world,
tough
right?
environment right
It is
now.
not
Yep.
the easiest thing to do, so I'm curious to see what they come out with there. What about you? You listen to some of the same stuff. We're all running around. We did some tapings for our Yes Network show that are going to be dynamite. But what were your takeaways?
Yeah, so the onstage takeaway for me, and I didn't listen to all the panels, unfortunately, because I was running around, as you said. It seemed like real estate was a topic in literally every single session, and you and I have been talking about this for a while. I think we were a little early on it, but it does feel like basically everyone has figured out that as you think about ancillary businesses around your sports property, real estate is a big one. And one of my panels I was on with Alex Wicks, who runs the Bernabeu, the newly renovated to the tune of $2 billion Real Madrid stadium. And he talked a lot about not just obviously you want to have concerts, and they had Taylor Swift there for a few nights. You want to have 365 days a year foot traffic, which they've done with, it's from as small as a Starbucks to restaurants to a Real Madrid museum and stadium tour.
No
And
bar
he said,
mitzvahs, though.
no bar mitzvahs or weddings, but he said they get 10,000 tours a day, I think was the number he said.
What?
Which
That
is
can't.
crazy.
How can that wait? 10,000 people?
People, yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
I asked him, what yesterday was Tuesday. The team was on the road playing Liverpool in Champions League. I was like, what's happening right now? Like, if I was there right now, he's like, oh, we're doing thousands of tours a day. The Starbucks, which you can get to from the street, but the entire backdrop of the Starbucks is the stadium and the field itself. He's like, that's jammed. Promise
Bet.
you. There's
How much
six
is the tour?
restaurants
Do you
that are
know? Is the
doing.
tour free or do they
I don't
charge
know
for it?
exactly what the tours are. It sounds like what the Cowboys have done, right?
Yeah,
Which is
that's
has
exactly
made
what I was
stadium
thinking.
tours
Yep.
a big thing. And Real Madrid dealt with the challenge that some sports teams have. Fenway to a degree, although there was some development to do around Fenway Park. Bernabeu is in the middle of a neighborhood, and there is literally no room
Lambeau Field.
anywhere around the footprint. So folks who have seen it, it's a cool video. They have a retractable grass field that, instead of pulling outside on train tracks like we've seen it in NFL stadiums around the country, there's no room to pull out a field next to the stadium. So it goes underneath. It breaks apart into 6 pieces. They stack 6 on top of each other in an underground greenhouse where they grow the grass. He said that cost $300 million, just that system.
I'm surprised that was it. Yeah.
So and obviously that makes it easier to have a concert in on a Saturday and have Real Madrid play on a Sunday on a grass field if you need to. So that creates a lot of options about events, makes the playing surface better, etc.
May I interject for
NFL,
1 second? Can I
yeah,
interject for 1 second? Because I didn't hear that part live, but hearing you say that makes me react. That's bonkers. Like I don't want to just like let that go. That's bonkers.
That they spent $300 million on a
and that
greenhouse?
It breaks apart and it stacks underneath, and there's an underground greenhouse. The Arizona Cardinals, it just goes right outside the stadium. They have the room to do that. There's the sun. It's lovely. But
exactly.
the engineering required. So let me get this straight. I would love to be in that planning meeting. So we don't have room. The field can't go out. So what do you think we should do? I think subterranean field growing. Yeah. Yes, grass growing. That's what we should do.
Grow lights underneath. And
unbelievable.
When we did that, we did a grass field versus turf field series for Sportico a year ago. When I did a lot of that reporting, I was asking a lot of folks in the NFL. It's clear that players prefer grass. There's maybe a health benefit to grass. Owners want to be able to do concerts and have other sporting events and do other things on the turf. So they prefer the actual artificial turf. Why not do both? We have a system. Real Madrid has done it. Everyone I talked to said it was way too expensive.
Yeah.
Right. We're not going to spend $300 million on an underground greenhouse for our stadium. And that's the challenge for Real, right? Is how do you get, and I asked Alex this, how do you guarantee the ROI on something that any stadium owner would like to have, but how do you make sure it's worth it for you financially to spend $300 million on that? So I thought that was an interesting conversation. Privately, Scott, I think the thing that stood out to me There were a number of folks there who had just come back from Saudi Arabia for the FII conference. A
Mm-hmm.
number of folks who were going to be out in Doha for or other parts of the Middle East for F1 races and other events coming up in the next few months. It seemed like everyone I talked to had either just come back or was about to go, or both, to the Middle East, meeting with sovereign wealth funds, going for events themselves, whether sporting events or networking events, etc. Again, this is not a new thing necessarily, but it does feel like a lot of the walls that have existed between Middle Eastern sovereign wealth and sports, at least privately, are coming down, and coming down quite rapidly.
Oh, absolutely. As you know, I made my plane reservation this morning for my flight to Doha. I will be
Mm-hmm.
in the paddock for the F1 race. Looking forward to that. Got a few meetings set up around the area. Um, Along with the folks that I know are going, it is interesting. It is fun to ask them for their itineraries. Nobody goes to one place. If
Yeah.
you're going, it's, oh, I'm going to stop in Doha. I'm going to Riyadh. I'm going to Abu Dhabi. I'm going to Dubai. Yeah, you make the rounds. And like you said, the sovereign wealth funds are all interested in U.S. sport, whether that means bringing U.S. sport to the region. Everybody's interested in that. Whether it's just investment, there's some of that. Whether there's some collab, there's some of that. Whether it's entertainment and movies, and there's some of that. So whether it's universities, there's some of
Yeah.
that. So you're right. The lines are blurring in terms of what investment is coming to the U.S., what's being exported, and what kind of business is being done together.
Another fun one. We were laughing about the goats. So Bubba Watson's his live golf team name is the Range Goats. I didn't realize he's an owner of the team in addition to being
Yeah.
the team captain. We laughed about it, but if you had told him 10 years ago he was going to own a golf team in 2025, he would have been like, "What do you like, own a golf team? What does that even look like?"
Well, if you told him 10 years ago he was going to own the General Lee, he'd have probably laughed at that too.
Exactly. We talked a bit about the Range Goats, but goats for him, it's also a philanthropic effort, and he was talking about going to Guatemala with his team, and they donate goats to
Literal
folks
goats.
in
Yeah.
impoverished, literal goats, because they help with nutrition. They help with obviously meat if needed. I know there's cow programs, there's donated cow programs around the globe as well. Bubba's doing something similar with goats. I did not realize kind of the extent of the philanthropy that's kind of built into what he's doing, at least with his team at Live Golf. And it kind of started with a kind of a joke about golf and petting zoos don't seem like they go hand in hand, but they set up goat petting zoos for fans and their children, families that go to Live Golf events. So yeah, I thought that one was interesting too. There's so many athletes that are doing fun, cool, creative things with their portfolios. Bubba, who, as you said, owns a minor league baseball team in his hometown of Pensacola, has this golf team. Said on stage he's interested in owning NBA. So would love to get involved. I think his wife is a former WNBA player,
Correct. I
Scott,
believe
in Charlotte.
Charlotte Sting player. Yep.
Yeah, so there's WNBA fandom in his household. I was impressed and curious to see what he does next.
Funny, we're talking about real estate across the Trenchant today. By the way, did you see that AC Milan and Inter will be like refurbishing San Siro?
I
They've
did
been
not see
looking.
that.
Yeah, so that came out this morning. Again, real estate projects are part of all of these buys. I
You have to.
believe.
Yeah, you
I
can't
believe
be
Redbird's
stagnant.
initial plan was probably a new stadium, but as we've seen through many people trying to get stadiums done in Italy, not the easiest thing.
Yeah,
But
especially in Italy. Yeah.
yeah, if you redo San Siro, which is an iconic venue, redo it with the modern amenities, or as I like to call the cash register portions of the stadium, just as good. And you have two teams, which is good. Curious to see what it looks like in terms of retail, all the event space, all the high end. That's what the AC Milan brand is to me, especially in that town. So I'm curious to see exactly what the finished product will look like.
One thing that jumped out to me, just to close the book on the real estate, early in our conversation with Alex Wicks, who runs again the Bernabeu Real Madrid Stadium, said that they considered moving the stadium to the outskirts of town. Because, as I said, there was not a lot of land around the stadium. It made it for a hard construction project. It made for an expensive construction project, and it meant that they will forever be constrained by what they can do around the building. And they apparently took a serious look at moving it out to where their practice facility is. I don't know the layout of Madrid, so I don't know exactly how far, but I imagine that would have been met with some consternation from some diehard Real Madrid fans. But it made me think of conversations you and I have had again about Fenway Park or about Yankee Stadium, right? These stadiums that have been in very tightly packed neighborhoods forever, and you basically can't move them for history reasons. But to contrast that with something like the Atlanta Braves and what they built at the Battery, which was, when it happened, was a large move distance wise. People felt it was out in the middle of nowhere, but the benefit for the team there is that there's all this land and they can do all of this stuff around it. Mixed use retail, they can do hospital, they can do hotel, they can do office space, they can do restaurants, they can do entertainment, movie theater, all that stuff. So I thought that was interesting. I was surprised to hear him say that Real Madrid seriously looked at moving its stadium, one of the most famous soccer stadiums, and at one point one of the largest, or the largest, soccer stadium in the world, looked at moving that to a completely different part of Madrid.
Yeah, well, just look at some of the teams in the same region. You've got the Patriots that have Patriot Place, smack dab outskirts of town, 2-lane highway, not the easiest to ingress or egress, but you've got all the ancillary things around that pro sports teams want, including the Olive Garden. But if you have Fenway, I mean, you're stuck. There's a highway there. You're done. That's why they have a Green Monster. There's just no more room, but you can buy up some of the bars and restaurants around the area, much like Wrigleyville. I mean, when's the last time you went to Wrigley Field and sort of walked around?
I've only been there once. I was there probably 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay, so changed. Yeah, still
Game
changed.
day game. Sorry. And it was all the reputation. It was the perfect weather, the quaint baseball sounds. It lived up to the billing, that's for sure.
Yeah, but Yankee Stadium again. You were right next door from where the old stadium was, but it's a bigger, modern cash register. That's what the stadium is. You try to keep the historical perspective in the new building. I got it, but that's what teams do these days. You've got to get all the ancillary revenue streams coming. So what else would you need if you're going to have a good labor fight? You need to have all the ancillary streams to talk about it.
Also on that Real Madrid panel was Josh Empson, who runs Sixth Street's sports practice. They're an investor in the stadium project alongside Real Madrid. But at one point he said something interesting about how he thinks about the opportunity for funds like Sixth Street in college sports. And Sixth Street was deep down the line with on a potential investment in Florida State that didn't actually end up materializing. But he said that he feels it's similar to what's happening in international soccer right now, where there are blue blood, blue chip programs that have all the money in the world that can spend it like crazy. There's all these other tiers of teams that are trying to compete or trying to be close to competing and trying to be realistic about their income and where they are. And there's different structures. Real Madrid is owned by its socios, its fans, and they are trying to figure out some way to maybe restructure that in a way that gets capital investment a possibility, some way of monetizing further the value of the team. But it's different, but not that different than public universities, right? Who have public mandates and they have public athletic departments. So I thought that was interesting to hear him. Sixth Street has looked at international soccer, they've looked at European soccer, they've looked at all the leagues, and they've looked at college, and him to equate those two as the two that he feels kind of similar in their challenges and their structure, I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, and then we also had a Liga MX panel with Tylis, and Al, by the way, is pulling double duty. He's also running the Apollo Sports Fund, so he's looking at a little bit of everything. But I remember in the back when I asked the Sembebeo guys, I was like, well, so what's the difference in the revenue between old stadium and new stadium? And Josh just chimed in. He's like, yeah, I'm interested in that answer. I bet you are as an investor.
Hundreds of millions. Yeah, it's a big difference. And yeah, the Mexican panel, I actually didn't get to watch. It's one of the ones. I think these are going to go on YouTube. Is that right?
They should be. I didn't see it, and I missed Jed York and Alguido. Did you catch Jed now?
Either, but the panel about Mexican soccer, I am fascinated by, because depending on who you ask in our industry,
it's either the greatest opportunity or
the greatest opportunity or a blinking red light and a caution sign. And I get asked constantly about it. We get asked to do valuations constantly. There's been talks at Liga MX and MLS, and increased partnerships and maybe even merger at some point. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on in Mexico soccer wise, and I would love to hear Al and Alejandro and Mikel break it down with Kurt, who moderated that. Our colleague Kurt Badenhausen.
All right, I'll bring it a little closer to home. Also, something interesting. Everybody's cutting sports. All the college programs are cutting sports. That's what we hear. Budget this, budget that, cutting sports. Fairleigh Dickinson University, home of my high school pal, Jared Stein. I believe you probably, if you look at the baseball records at FDU, you probably see the Stein name still in there, even though he graduated, I'm guessing, 92 or 93. Although he was a little bit of a clown, maybe 94. But they're taking a different approach, and they're adding programs, and you would think it would be in things that, the stick and ball, things you think of revenue producing. If you said to me, there's a great argument to be made for Fairleigh Dickinson University in New Jersey to add a men's fencing team to be the solve, that's SALVE and SOLVE, of all budget woes, I would say you're out of your mind, but that's what you're telling me is happening.
It's a fascinating story, and it's a really interesting way that Fairleigh Dickinson, small private school in New Jersey, looks at its budget, and it does so by thinking about the athletic department as a piece of the university as a whole. And this is something that it maybe sounds obvious to folks who are listening out there, but a lot of athletic departments, big ones and small ones across college sports, consider themselves kind of siloed off from the rest of the university. And that includes their accounting. And one of the reasons why you see a number of schools, when times get tough financially, start eliminating programs, which you saw during COVID, and you saw right now in the wake of the House settlement and a restructuring of money, where athletes are now getting paid tens of millions of dollars a year from their universities. One of the reasons you see sports get cut is because they look at just their own little silo and say, oh, these teams don't make money. They do cost money. So to balance my books, or to make the P&L a little bit stronger, I need to get rid of some of these money-losing sports. Fairleigh Dickinson, again, looks at the athletic department across the entire university's balance sheet and sees a whole lot of athletes that pay full tuition for a lot of these sports. And if you think about it that way, which Fairleigh Dickinson does, a lot of these small sports that are quote unquote non-revenue sports are actually generating profit for the university. And that's because, and we'll use fencing as an example, the plan here for Fairleigh Dickinson is to have a 24-person men's fencing team in a couple years, and to have about 6 scholarships spread around those 24 people. That's easy math, Scott. That's 18 new tuitions, full tuition, or however you want to discount it, depending on who they are, where they're coming from, what they're bringing, etc. That's 18 students that are coming to Fairleigh Dickinson that might otherwise not have. And for a school like that, which is enrollment driven, they're facing a lot of the same enrollment challenges that so many schools across the country are facing. Adding 18 more students does not tax the university-wide infrastructure in a way that it might seem. It doesn't mean you need to hire a bunch more teachers. A lot of dorms are sitting empty year over year anyways, right? So filling those dorms doesn't cost a lot of infrastructure. So when you think about it that way, which Fairleigh Dickinson does, adding more sports is something that actually can produce profit. And I mentioned COVID-19. So when all these schools were cutting sports in the wake of the COVID pandemic, Fairleigh Dickinson added 2 sports. They added men's volleyball and they added women's lacrosse. Both those teams, 4 years later, according to the school, are contributing more than $300,000 a year in profit. Again, this is accounting for the tuition paid. They're both profitable, $300,000+ a year. That's basically what they're expecting, hoping for men's fencing moving forward. But I think there's a lesson here for a lot of schools and athletic administrators and university presidents who think of athletics in kind of its own little bubble, but don't fully realize that as enrollment becomes a bigger and bigger challenge for schools across the country, that athletics and the tuition paid by non-scholarship athletes is a big piece of the financial puzzle for a lot of schools. And I say kudos to Fairleigh Dickinson for thinking about that the proper way.
Yeah, well, they know the psychology of athletes, that's for sure. They just want to play. Well, sorry, I can't give you a scholarship, but I will give you the ability to be an athlete. Okay, I'll pay full tuition and come and do that, right?
It's a critical part of the student experience for so many people who are going to college. Yeah, they want that experience. And there's not a ton of men's fencing teams around the country. I grew up in North Jersey. A lot of high schools in my area had fencing programs. So there's a lot of local fencers. And the other thing is, Fairleigh Dickinson already had a women's fencing team. So when you think about the added cost of a program, they can share a lot of the equipment. The facility they're renting will be shared by both. Sports like fencing can share coaching and staff. And fencing teams, men and women, travel to the same events and compete in the same events together. So it's not like a men's and women's basketball team where they might be on the road at different times, or one team is going here to play and the other team is going there to play. All of the travel is in the exact same schedule. So adding a men's fencing team was also probably cheaper.
Rent the van, a little bit bigger van, that's all.
Yeah, a little bit bigger bus. Cheaper than adding like a riflery team or a water polo team. The facility cost is relatively low. Again, water polo, you need a pool, and pools are expensive both to build and to maintain. Fencing doesn't necessarily have that. They also got a grant from a 3-year grant from USA Fencing, the national governing body, which obviously benefits from more colleges offering fencing. So there's a lot of different pieces to the puzzle here. But when you put it all together and think about it the way that Fairleigh Dickinson does, they feel very confident that in just a few years, adding men's fencing, a relatively obscure sport that is not going to generate a lot of revenue necessarily, is going to generate profit on the university's balance sheet.
Well, my groan-worthy response would be that I'm ready to proclaim FDU as the Epe Center of Creative Thinking in the Athletic Department Revenue Boards.
No, I thought you were going to make a sabermetrics joke, but
nope,
the Epe Center
wasn't
is
the Epe Center. In the groan-worthy, that's worse, but better. I like it. All right, let's finish up with, speaking of worse. So the Atlanta Hawks seem to have gotten ripped off by about $3.8 million when one of their executives, the second highest ranking executive, looks like on the finance side, happened to also be, this is where you start to get silly ideas. When you're the sole contact regarding payment issues to credit cards, you start looking around, maybe saying, nobody really else sees what's going on here or knows what's happening. So one of their executives decided to charge a whole bunch of stuff, like trips to Hawaii, Thailand, Switzerland. Faked a receipt from a Vegas hotel. That was the downfall. You can't do that stuff. But it brought me back to the Sacramento Kings executive who was stealing money from the team. Seems as if there should be some better software here, Kate. Much like we're seeing in the sports betting world, where you just can't get by. Any sort of activity on a player that isn't normal would get flagged. I would think that these kind of charges would get flagged, but apparently went on for quite a while.
$3.8 million is so much money. And you mentioned the Wynn Hotel in Las Vegas expense. There must be more to this, but spending $217,000 on a Las Vegas hotel feels like impossible. Like, was he there for 8 months?
Oh, see, now you're thinking small. You're not thinking the top floor, the expansive view of the strip. You're thinking the little room. No, come on, Novi. If you're stealing money, you ain't staying in a single. Would you like the double bed or a king? No, come on.
Clearly, yeah. And it does, I think, go to show in some ways that some major sports teams, like an NBA team, can be a relatively small operation from an employee standpoint. And yeah, if you have one person who is, as you said, the kind of sole contact regarding payment issues, and that person wants to do nefarious things and manipulate financial reports and embezzle money and goose up his personal expenses on the corporate card. Sometimes that, we saw with the Jaguars a couple of years ago, right? And that was a little bit different, but an employee who was embezzling monies from the team to fund his daily fantasy habits. So not a headline you want if you're the Atlanta Hawks, obviously, and just the latest in a string of kind of bizarre legal issues involving the NBA.
Mike McCann, get on it. All right, close it out, my friend.
All righty, he is Scott Soshnick. You can find him at Soshnick. I am Eben Novi Williams on Twitter at Novi_Williams. The show is produced by Justin Greenewald. Thank you very much to Justin. And Matt Palacio, Sebastian Milo, and Carol Winston would like you to know that you can follow the show at Sporticast,
people now,
which is the hub of the Sportico Media Network.